Chapter 9. Guests in the House. I did not sleep the whole night. In the morning, when I went down to the kitchen, I saw a servant I had never seen before. She was 40 or so, with gray hair and a ruddy complexion. She was sitting by the fire, her head bent low, holding a piece of fabric on her lap, which she was busy sewing. I was wondering if she might be Grace Poole, when one of the other servants, as if reading my mind, said, "I don't believe you have met Miss Grace Poole." Grace Poole raised her face from the sewing. She looked somewhat severe but utterly calm. There was nothing on her face to suggest that this was a mad woman who had attempted murder a few hours earlier. Just then, Mrs. Fairfax entered the room. "Did you hear, Miss Eyre?" she asked. "Mr. Rochester almost burned himself to death last night. He forgot to blow out his candle before going to sleep, and his bed caught fire." "I heard some strange noise," I said, staring at Grace Poole. But nothing in her face had changed expression. Quietly, she had gone back to her sewing. "Is Grace Poole peculiar?" I asked Mrs. Fairfax later, when we were alone. "Peculiar? No, she just keeps to herself." I did not understand why Mr. Rochester would keep her on staff after the last murderous act. It didn't make any sense. I didn't see him all day. Surely he'll ask me to have tea with him this evening, I thought. The evening came and went, and I neither heard from him nor saw him. The next morning, while I was having breakfast with Mrs. Fairfax, she said to me, "You haven't touched your food, Miss Eyre. Are you feeling poorly?" "I never felt better." "You look so pale. Did you sleep well last night?" "I never slept better." "Oh well," Mrs. Fairfax said. "Maybe it's the change in weather. It's such a beautiful spring day, perfect for Mr. Rochester's journey." "Journey?" I said, trying to conceal my despair. "Why, is he going someplace?" "He's already gone. He'll be away for 2 or 3 weeks. He's visiting Lord Ingram." I think he must have decided to get himself a wife. Lord Ingram has 3 daughters, all of them beautiful. But I think Mr. Rochester has his heart set on the youngest, Blanche. She's a perfect match for him. "Why is that?" "She looks grand like a queen. She's as imposing and proud as Mr. Rochester is. She's tall, has lovely sloping shoulders, large dark eyes that shine like jewels, and the longest, glossiest black curly hair you can imagine." I thought I was going to be sick with despair. I excused myself and went to my room. "You fool," I thought. "You silly woman. How could you have thought Mr. Rochester had taken an interest in you? What do you have that can please a man, any man, let alone a gentleman of great wealth and fortune? Look at your limp, mousy hair. Look at your pale complexion. Look at your thin, small body." I covered my face and cried in shame. In the 3 weeks that he was away, I managed to calm myself. Whenever I yearned for him, whenever I felt love rushing to my heart, I stopped it. "Just be grateful you have a good job," I said to myself. "He's your employer and nothing more." All this time, there had been no news of Mr. Rochester. At last, word came that Thornfield Hall should be made ready to receive a large party of guests. Lord Ingram and his family, Mr. Eshton, Sir George Lynn, Colonel Dent and their families, and several other people whose names I did not catch. Each guest would be bringing up a retinue of servants. Upward of 50 people altogether were expected. For days, Thornfield Hall was in an uproar. Rooms had to be aired out, furniture had to be polished, floors had to be scrubbed and waxed. At last, the day came when the guests arrived. I watched from my window to see if I could spot Miss Ingram, but all I could see of the ladies from above were large hats with plumes and fluttering veils. Poor little Adele expected that she would be presented to the guests right away. She kept trying on different dresses, begging me to fix her hair in new ways. For hours she looked at her little face in the mirror, pouting, smiling, trying on expressions. But no invitation came that day, nor the next, nor the next. The guests were to remain for 3 weeks. The first whole week had passed, and Adele had yet to be asked to go downstairs and mingle with the guests. All this time, I did not come face to face with Mr. Rochester even once. I saw him several times from a distance, however, riding in the company of the same woman. She had long, curly black hair. It must be Miss Ingram, I thought. I could see they were chatting and laughing as they rode. I had never heard Mr. Rochester laugh, and it made my heart sink to see him laugh now. At last, the day came when Adele was asked to join the party. I dressed her up and sent her down. A few minutes later, Mrs. Fairfax came to my room and said that Mr. Rochester demanded that I go down as well. "Wear something nice, my dear, and hurry," she said. Something nice? I only had that one good dress and it was black. I brushed my hair to give it some shine, then pulled it back, twisting it in a tight bun. I looked so drab, I hoped that no one would notice me. The room was full of people, standing, milling about, seated in chairs. With their finery and jewels, they looked like a flock of brightly plumed birds, some perched on chairs, some standing with their chests puffed out. Their laughter sounded like cackling, their prattle like chirping. They were bird-brained, too, from what I could gather from their talk. I looked around the room, trying to find Mr. Rochester. I remember how he had looked the last time we'd been together, after the fire in his room, how his face had glowed with love, and how my heart started beating loud and fast. At last, I spotted him among his guests. He was superior to them by far. He had substance and depth. He had true dignity. His features were harsh, jutting eyebrows and a square chin, a firm, willful mouth, sunken eyes. But how they softened when he smiled! How bright and gentle and sweet his eyes became! When the other men smiled, their smiles were like a graceful grimace. It revealed nothing of their souls, as if they had none. Oh God, I thought, I still love him! He was aware of my presence, but was acting as if he did not want to see me. He was paying full attention to Miss Ingram, as if there was no one else in the room. Miss Ingram was pointing to Adele. "So, is this your ward?" she asked. "I suppose you have a governess for her." "Yes, I do," Mr. Rochester said. "She must be somewhere in the room." "I couldn't stand any of my governesses," Miss Ingram said. "They were nasty, or they were plain, stupid, and ridiculous." She turned her face to Adele, gave her a swift, indifferent glance, and said, "What an adorable child." Mr. Rochester took her by the elbow and led her to the library. He's in love with her, I thought. He wants to be alone with her. Much as it hurt for me to realize this, I was relieved. Now I could go back to my room. I had obeyed his command to come down, and he had seen that I had. There was no more reason for me to stay. Reader, I wanted to cry. Blanche Ingram was very beautiful indeed, but she was vain and mean. She did not love Mr. Rochester. I could see she was a woman who did not love anyone but herself. She'll make him unhappy, I thought. He's not a man who can love beauty alone. He needs to love a woman who has heart, who has soul. He needs a woman who is as passionate and intelligent as he is, a woman who can appreciate him and understand him. I slipped out the door. No one had noticed me go in. No one noticed me leave. I was about to breathe a sigh of relief when, as I was turning the corner of the corridor, I came face to face with Mr. Rochester. "Miss Eyre, how do you do?" he asked. "I'm very well, sir." "Why did you not come and speak to me in the drawing room?" I thought that was the question I should be asking him. Nevertheless, I answered, "I did not wish to disturb you, sir. You were talking with someone." "What have you been doing to keep yourself busy?" "Teaching Adele as usual." "You look paler than usual," he said. "What's the matter?" "Nothing at all, sir." "You're sure you didn't catch the cold the night you half drowned me?" "I'm sure," I said. "I'm in perfect health." "If you're feeling so well, why did you leave the gathering?" "I'm tired, sir." "You don't look tired," he said. "You look depressed. Tell me, what's bothering you?" "Nothing at all, sir. I'm happy." "Why, just now your tears brimmed over with tears," he said. "Talk to me." His eyes had suddenly softened. His face had turned pale. "Talk to me," he said again. I looked away. "Miss Eyre," he said softly, "I see that you want to be alone. I excuse you this time, but understand that as long as my visitors stay here, I expect to see you in the drawing room every evening. Now, good night, my—" He stopped mid-sentence, bit his lip, turned away from me abruptly, and went back to the drawing room.